The Threepeat, 3 consecutive titles or championships. A sign of remarkable dominance and consistency, the Threepeat is one of the rarest achievements in the sports world. In fact, in the entire history of the Big Four professional sports leagues in America, the MLB, NHL, NBA, and NFL, only 9 active franchises lay claim to a Threepeat. The same is true for the highest levels of European football, where in the top flights of Germany, Spain, Italy, and France, merely 13 active clubs have ever won 3 straight league titles. And in the nearly 140-year history of the English Football League, the sport's oldest institution, only 5 clubs have done so. Legendary British manager Herbert Chapman did it with Huddersfield in the 1920s, and then replicated that feat a decade later with the mighty Arsenal. About 50 years later, Bob Paisley and Joe Fagan would lead Liverpool's golden era to an incredible 7 titles in 9 seasons, which featured 1 three-peat. But since the dawn of the Premier League era in 1992, only 2 clubs have achieved such a feat: Manchester United and Manchester City. Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United did it twice, first from 1998 to 2001, and then again from 2006 through 2009. And finally, in May 2023, Pep Guardiola led Manchester City to their 5th title in 6 seasons, further cementing his already growing legacy in English football. Today, we are going to take a comprehensive look at the 2 most recent Premier League three-peats. We will explore the elements that made these teams truly exceptional, from the star-studded rosters and visionary managers, to the tactical brilliance and unforgettable moments that made these teams 2 of the best to ever compete. Before we get to Manchester United's second three-peat, it's important that we understand the first. Manchester United absolutely dominated the Premier League in the 1990s. They won 4 of the first 6 Premier League titles and then accomplished their first three-peat. The first season of that three-peat, 1998 through 99, was especially significant because Manchester United won the European treble, becoming the first English team to win the league title, FA Cup, and the Champions League in the same season. In fact, many still consider the 99 treble winners to be the best side English football has ever seen, and they might be right. Fast forward to 2006, and the landscape of the Premier League has shifted greatly. Ferguson's United had won just 1 Premier League title in the previous 5 seasons. First, it was Arsene Wenger's Arsenal, who enjoyed back-to-back league titles with the Invincibles team, and then it was the special one. Jose Mourinho arrived at Chelsea, winning back-to-back league titles his first 2 seasons, playing some of the best defensive football we've ever seen. Many wondered if Sir Alex Ferguson's grip over English football and the Premier League in general was slipping. This was still very much a United side that was transitioning away from the core that won them the treble in 1999. The likes of David Beckham, Roy Keane, Jaap Stam, and Andy Cole were no longer there, to name just a few, and United really had to rebuild the squad and find a new way to compete without that core. They also lost their top scorer in 4 of the previous 5 seasons in Ruud van Nistelrooy, and did not buy a direct replacement on the market that summer. Comparatively, Chelsea were loading up yet again, acquiring former Ballon d'Or winner Andrei Shevchenko from AC Milan and 3-time German Footballer of the Year Michael Ballack from Bayern Munich. If Sir Alex Ferguson was going to reclaim his throne, he was going to have to go through Jose Mourinho's Chelsea first. Now let's take a look at Manchester United's squad during the 2006-07 season. In goal, Edwin van der Sar was an experienced shot stopper with an already illustrious career under his belt. Gary Neville was the first choice right back, offering defensive stability on the right flank, while Patrice Evra served as a more attacking option from left back. The center defensive partnership mainly featured Rio Ferdinand, an established center half entering the peak of his career, and Nemanja Vidic, a recent arrival from Spartak Moscow who wasted no time settling in at United. John O'Shea and Wes Brown were excellent squad players who provided United with plenty of versatility, reliability, and consistency from the bench. Club legend and treble winner Paul Scholes formed a dynamic midfield partnership with Michael Carrick, who arrived that summer from Tottenham Hotspur. On the left side of the midfield was Ryan Giggs, who despite being in the twilight of his legendary Man United career, was still a vital piece of the puzzle. Opposite Giggs was a 22-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo, who at that time had only showcased some of the sensational speed, power, and goal-scoring prowess that we've come to know him by. The strike partnership was formed by the relentless and versatile Wayne Rooney, paired with a more traditional center forward like Louis Saha or Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. This 4-4-2 system allowed United to create overloads while also maintaining their defensive stability and control over the midfield. United started the 2006-07 season dominant from the jump. They won 11 of their first 13 league games, including wins against Tottenham and Liverpool. Their lone blemish was a 1-0 home loss to Arsenal, who would end up doing the double over United that season. They drew Celtic, Benfica, and Copenhagen in the Champions League group stage, advancing with relative ease despite 1-0 losses away at Copenhagen and Benfica. Chelsea also started the season well, and a 1-1 draw at Old Trafford in November kept the title race close heading into the winter months. United lost at the Emirates in early January before rattling off 7 straight victories to give them plenty of cushion over Chelsea before the home stretch. In the Champions League knockout stages, United dispatched Lille in the round of 16 and Roma in the quarterfinals, including an 8-3 victory on aggregate over Roma en route to a semi-final berth against AC Milan. Keep in mind that this was largely still a Milan side that was at the peak of its powers under Carlo Ancelotti. They'd won the Serie A few years prior, they'd also won the Champions League a few years prior, and would go on to win the Champions League that season as well. The first leg at Old Trafford finished 3-2 United, but 2 first-half goals from Milan at the San Siro, notably Kaká scoring an iconic goal, was too much for United to overcome. They bowed out of the semis 5-2 on aggregate, and Milan would defeat Liverpool to become champions 3 weeks later. United needed to put that result past them as they had a title-clinching Manchester derby 3 days later, and with 2 match days remaining, United returned to the Premier League summit via a Cristiano Ronaldo penalty. In the domestic cups, they had a forgettable League Cup campaign, losing to Southend United in the round of 16, although they beat Villa, Portsmouth, and Watford en route to an FA Cup final matchup with Chelsea. Chelsea would get their revenge in the FA Cup final thanks to a 116th minute winner from Didier Drogba. All in all, this was a successful season for the Red Devils. They re-established their foothold on the Premier League, and they were competitive on 2 other fronts as well. This was still very much a younger Ronaldo, with excellent pace, power, and plenty of flair to his game, but he was rapidly integrating excellent positioning, tactical awareness, and clinical finishing to his game. He became the guy at United that season, forming a spectacular partnership with Wayne Rooney, who added 24 goals and 15 assists of his own in 2 more appearances than Ronaldo. This saw Ronaldo take home the PFA Player of the Year award, as well as the Premier League Player of the Season award. This was also the first full season that Rio Ferdinand and Nemanja Vidic played together. They conceded only 27 goals in the league, and they were both named in the PFA Team of the Year, alongside teammates Van der Sar, Neville, Evra, Scholes, and Giggs. The summer of 2007 was a busy one for Manchester United. They added the likes of Anderson, Gerard Piqué, Johnny Evans, Owen Hargreaves, and Nani, and most notably, they secured Carlos Tevez' signature from West Ham following a 7-goal and 3-assist campaign in his debut Premier League season. Tevez would replace Louis Saha in the starting 11 for most of that following season. With Ole Gunnar Solskjaer now retired, United had a new star striker partnership for Rooney and Ronaldo to operate with, while Louis Saha was still a serviceable option on the bench. Besides that, the preferred 11 stayed largely unchanged, although Gary Neville missed a large chunk of time that year through injury, with Wes Brown and John O'Shea really stepping up and assuming key roles for the side. This was very much a deeper United side than in previous seasons, with the aforementioned signings plus the continued impact of Ji-Sung Park, Darren Fletcher, and Saha. With the retooled squad, United also received fortunate news from elsewhere in the league, with Thierry Henry departing Arsenal for Barcelona that summer, and in September of 2007, Jose Mourinho left Chelsea by mutual consent following a fallout with owner Roman Abramovich. Avram Grant would take charge of a still world-class Chelsea squad and did extremely well to push United to the brink on 2 fronts that season. United started their league campaign well, but would lose to Coventry in their first League Cup action of the season. This led to a renewed focus on the League and Champions League campaigns. They were drawn in the Champions League group with Roma, Sporting, and Dinamo Kyiv, and advanced with 16 of 18 possible points. They eliminated Arsenal, Aston Villa, and Tottenham in the FA Cup, but would lose to Portsmouth in the 6th round of the competition. United rode 8 straight league wins to an early lead in the title race heading into the new year. The winter was challenging and saw them lose at West Ham and at home to Man City, who did the league double over them that season. March was an extremely pivotal month in their title charge. They played 5 matches that month in the Premier League, outscoring opponents 13-0. They survived Lyon in the Champions League round of 16 and handled Roma in the quarterfinals again, leading to a semi-final date with Frank Rijkaard's Barcelona. Sandwiched between the semi-final ties was a title decider at Stamford Bridge, which Chelsea would take 2-1 and further extend the title race. Following a 0-0 draw at the Nou Camp, a lone Paul Scholes winner at Old Trafford was enough to see United to their first Champions League final since the treble-winning 1999 season. On the league front, United needed to beat West Ham and Wigan in their remaining 2 games to become back-to-back champions. They beat Wigan 2-0 on the final day, thanks to goals from Ronaldo and Giggs, securing their second consecutive title. The 2008 Champions League final was held in Moscow between Chelsea and United, marking the first ever all-English Champions League final. United scored first via a Cristiano header, but Frank Lampard equalized in the dying minutes of the half. The match would go to penalties, and an Edwin van der Sar save on Nicolas Anelka secured United's second ever Champions League trophy. While the back line was undeniably incredible that season, to this day the third best single-season defensive record in Premier League history, the true story of the season was Ronaldo grabbing the title of best player in the world. He continued adding elite elements to his game, tallying an immense 42 goals and 8 assists in all competitions. He also matched Alan Shearer's 38-game season record of 31 goals in the Premier League. The front two of Rooney and Carlos Tevez really brought out the best of each other. They could both operate as the central number 9 or tuck in between the lines and operate as more of a number 10. They both had excellent work rates, tactical versatility, and a knack for crucial goals. Combine that with Ronaldo's dominance, and this was some trio. Together, they scored over 70% of all of Manchester United's league goals that campaign. This United side was arguably one of Sir Alex's greatest. They were honestly rather unfortunate not to win another treble this season. They played some outstanding football, while the front three and defense was at the height of its powers. Ronaldo would, again, wipe up all the end-of-season awards. Though United were less representative in the PFA Team of the Year this season, only Ronaldo, Vidic, and Ferdinand managed to feature. Ronaldo would later go on to pick up his first Ballon d'Or for his performances that season, and heading into the summer was attracting massive interest from none other than Real Madrid. The following summer was rather tame for the back-to-back champions. They lost Louis Saha on a free transfer, but brought in Dimitar Berbatov to replace him. The Bulgarian international signed for €38 million following a 24-goal and assist campaign with Tottenham the year prior. Perhaps United's best move of the summer was keeping Cristiano Ronaldo at the club amid intense interest from Real Madrid. A brief saga broke out that was eventually ended by a conversation had between Sir Alex Ferguson and Cristiano Ronaldo, in which he convinced the Portuguese star to return for one final season. This meant that the structure of the side remained largely unchanged heading into the season. This generally saw one of Berbatov and Tevez rotating up top with Rooney, though these two players had very contrasting styles. Tevez was a much more direct and more physically intense option, whereas Berbatov offered significantly less work rate but was still exceptionally skilled in his own right. This trio was very complementary to each other, and their partnership added a lot of versatility to United's attack. This was perhaps the deepest United squad of this era, and coincidentally, this side also finished with the most points of any of the Threepeat seasons, and they had the best showing in the domestic cups of any of the 3 teams as well. They lost away at Arsenal and Liverpool early in the league campaign. They also dropped points at Chelsea, but were otherwise near flawless over the first half of the season. They drew Villarreal, Celtic, and Aalborg BK in the Champions League and topped the group with 10 points. They beat Middlesbrough, QPR, Blackburn, and Derby en route to a League Cup final against Tottenham, which United won on pens after a 0-0 draw. United were much improved in the second half of the Premier League season, losing to only Fulham and Liverpool in the second half fixtures. They very nearly found themselves in the FA Cup final as well, but lost to Everton on pens in the semi-final. They sneaked by both Inter Milan and Porto in the round of 16 and quarterfinals of the Champions League knockouts, setting stage for a 4-2 drubbing of Arsenal on aggregate in the semi-finals. This result set up a much-anticipated matchup with Barcelona in the final. But first, they had to see out their Premier League campaign. Wins against City and Wigan took them 6 points clear of Liverpool with 2 match days remaining. Arsenal had the chance to get revenge for their Champions League defeat, but a 0-0 draw at Old Trafford confirmed United champions for a third consecutive season. Unfortunately, they were unable to replicate their double triumph of the previous season in the Champions League final in Rome. They lost to a young Barcelona side coached by none other than Pep Guardiola, who was in his first season of management at the Catalan club. United finished the season with a Premier League and League Cup double, but arguably should have and could have had more. This was a slightly less explosive side. Although they picked up more points than in previous seasons, the Rooney, Ronaldo, Berbatov, and Tevez connection wasn't as effective as their attack in previous years. Ryan Giggs picked up the PFA Player of the Year award, while Nemanja Vidic was named the Premier League Player of the Season. They were joined in the PFA Team of the Year by teammates Evra, Van der Sar, Ferdinand, and Ronaldo. This marked the final season of United's second and final Premier League three-peat. The following summer, Ronaldo would get his long-desired move to Real Madrid. In the 2009-10 season, United finished second to Carlo Ancelotti's Chelsea, but would manage to win 2 more league titles in the final 3 years of Sir Alex Ferguson's career. Sir Alex finished his career in 2013. He won 38 trophies as United boss, including a record 13 Premier Leagues. He is undoubtedly one of the single most influential figures in not just English football history, but in world football history. United's struggles in wake of his retirement are incredibly well documented. The club has failed at all levels for nearly a decade, leaving the door open for a decade of prosperity for their crosstown rivals. And that brings us to the next part of our story, Manchester City's three-peat. In September of 2008, while United were at their peak, City were acquired by Sheikh Mansour in what would become a controversial and sport-altering acquisition. Mansour proceeded to pump tons of cash into the project, poaching a few top executives from FC Barcelona along the way, including Ferran Soriano and Txiki Begiristain, becoming one of the most efficient clubs in England in the process. City won their first Premier League title in 2012 under Roberto Mancini. They would win another title 2 years later, this time under Manuel Pellegrini. In February 2016, City agreed a 3-year contract with Pep Guardiola, who had spent the previous 7 years dominating the Spanish and German leagues. He was also the architect of what many consider to be the greatest football team of all time during his time at Barcelona. City aspired for the best, and Guardiola was the ideal man for the job. In his first 3 seasons in charge, the Spaniard won 2 Premier Leagues, 2 League Cups, an FA Cup, and a Community Shield. But our story really starts in the summer of 2020, so that's where we'll head. After pushing Guardiola's City to the absolute brink in 2019, Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool finally reached the Premier League summit in the 2019-20 season in one of the most impressive campaigns we've ever seen. A bit like Ferguson in 2006, pundits alike wondered if Guardiola had been figured out by his peers and if his reign was coming to an end. While Guardiola's sides reached incredible heights a few years prior, they had lost significant firepower from those squads. Vincent Kompany left in 2019, and his absence greatly contributed to the down season of 2019-20. They also said goodbye to David Silva as well as Leroy Sané that summer. They brought in Nathan Ake from Bournemouth early in the window, but he was more of a Nicolas Otamendi replacement rather than a Kompany replacement. After several unsuccessful attempts to sign a top-class center-half, City settled on 23-year-old Ruben Diaz, far from their first choice, to salvage the backline that season. Despite the late addition to the defense, City struggled massively out of the gate that season, further compounding doubts over Guardiola's future at City. They only won 2 of their first 5 games, and after a 2-0 defeat at Tottenham in November, City sat 11th in the table, Guardiola's worst start in his managerial career. Fortunately, this loss kicked off a 28-match unbeaten streak in all competitions for City, including 15 straight wins in the league. This was Pep's 3rd time achieving such a feat at City, topped only by City and Liverpool's joint record of 18 set in the previous 2 seasons. They cruised through a Champions League group of Porto, Olympiacos, and Marseille with 16 points. They also eliminated Bournemouth, Burnley, Arsenal, Manchester United, and Spurs en route to a 4th straight League Cup victory. This was a season where City had to massively reinvent themselves. They no longer had the leadership and experience of Kompany and David Silva, while Sergio Aguero missed most of that season through various knocks. In Aguero's absence, a rotating cast of Gabriel Jesus, Kevin De Bruyne, Phil Foden, Ilkay Gundogan, and Bernardo Silva deputized in the false nine role, a role popularized by Guardiola's Barcelona, mainly with one Lionel Messi. They were still exceptionally deep elsewhere on the pitch. Ederson was one of the premier ball-playing goalkeepers on earth, while Diaz, Ake, Aymeric Laporte, and John Stones formed a formidable center-back quartet, with João Cancelo and Kyle Walker as fantastic complementary fullbacks. Rodri began to emerge as the heir to club legend Fernandinho, forming a great partnership with Kevin De Bruyne, Ilkay Gundogan, and Bernardo Silva in the heart of midfield. The front line was very robust, with the likes of Jesus, Sterling, Foden, Riyad Mahrez, and Ferran Torres all contributing, though it was the goal-scoring prowess of Ilkay Gundogan that really propelled City through the trying months of the season. The German scored 13 league goals in the season, becoming City's top scorer. With the title all but wrapped up and plenty of football to play, it looked like City could be on for the quadruple. They beat Gladbach and Dortmund in the Champions League knockouts before beating PSG in the semifinals to advance to the club's first Champions League final. With the league wrapped up, the quadruple hopes were extinguished by Chelsea in the FA Cup semis. Chelsea would dish out further heartbreak a few weeks later, beating City in the Champions League final via a Kai Havertz goal. While the season certainly didn't end exactly the way City hoped it would, re-establishing their grip over the Premier League was crucial to their continued success. Kevin De Bruyne, who added 10 goals and 18 assists in all competitions, took home a second straight PFA Player of the Year award. Joining him in the PFA Team of the Year were teammates Gundogan, Ederson, Stones, Cancelo, and Diaz, who would take home the Premier League Player of the Season in his debut campaign for City. City embarked on the summer of 2021 having to say goodbye to a club legend for the third straight season, this time being Sergio Aguero. With Ferran Torres as the lone striker option, Guardiola opted to seek an upgrade by attempting to lure Harry Kane away from Tottenham Hotspur. This began a month-long transfer saga in which City missed out on Kane with little time to find a replacement for him. They secured the signing of Jack Grealish for a British record transfer fee, but he was not the central striker that they so desired. Instead of scrambling to find an alternative to Kane, Guardiola opted for a second consecutive season of strikerless football. At the time, this was seen as a bit of a risk for City. Liverpool were set to return following an injury-riddled season prior. Did City have enough firepower to get over the line again? The system stayed mostly unchanged from the previous season. The false nine role was shared amongst the stars, while Grealish brought a new layer of control to the lineup. This was a breakout campaign for Rodri, who fully took over the reins from Fernandinho at the heart of the midfield this season. The first half of the season was rather inconsistent, but for the most part was the same old City. They did, however, lose to West Ham in the League Cup, ending a 21-match win streak in the competition. They finished top of a Champions League group of PSG, RB Leipzig, and Club Brugge. 2021 ended with City 8 points clear of Chelsea and 9 points clear of Liverpool at the top of the table, though draws with Southampton and Palace and a home loss to Tottenham left just enough room for Liverpool to creep back into the race in the new year. With their sights now firmly set on the treble, City fended off Sporting and Atletico Madrid to advance to the semifinals and face Real Madrid. Their treble hopes were again dashed in the FA Cup semifinals, this time by a Liverpool side peaking at the right time with a quadruple of their own on the mind. City's misfortune continued in the semifinal tie with Madrid. After taking a 4-3 lead back to the Spanish capital, City infamously collapsed in the dying minutes, having yet another Champions League campaign end in utter heartbreak. They had 4 league games remaining to fend off Liverpool's title charge, and the race would go down to the final 15 minutes of the season. On the final match day, needing a win to secure the title, City trailed Aston Villa 2-0 with about 20 minutes left. They proceeded to score 3 goals in 5 minutes in one of the craziest conclusions to a season in Premier League history. Guardiola won his 4th Premier League title, surpassing both Arsene Wenger and Jose Mourinho's 3. Despite the end-of-season heartbreak, this was still a successful season for City. They stopped Liverpool from winning another Premier League, and they won their 2nd straight title themselves. Kevin De Bruyne was excellent per usual, adding a 19-goal season to his already stellar repertoire. He also took home the Premier League Player of the Season award for his efforts. Riyad Mahrez was the team's top scorer with 24 goals in all competitions, while Foden, Silva, Sterling, and Jesus all had 20-plus goal involvements. while Liverpool's Mohamed Salah won the PFA Player of the Year award. De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, and Cancelo featured in the Team of the Year. Heading into the summer of 2022, the champions secured a massive coup in the transfer window. They signed 22-year-old Norwegian phenom Erling Haaland for €60 million following a 3-year stay with Borussia Dortmund. At the time of signing, Haaland had scored 135 goals in 166 senior matches for Molde, Salzburg, and Dortmund. It was a match made in heaven. The team, who had just won back-to-back titles without a proper number 9, just signed one of the best young strikers in recent memory. This was a scary prospect for the rest of the league. City were far from their clinical best in the 2 previous seasons, and Haaland's arrival added an entirely new dimension to their attack. They also added Calvin Phillips from Leeds as an understudy to Rodri, as well as backup keeper Stefan Ortega and depth center back Manuel Akanji from the Bundesliga. That summer also marked the arrival of Julian Alvarez, the Argentinian striker signed from River Plate in January of 2022. City were, yet again, far from their best in the beginning stages of the season. They lost the Community Shield to Liverpool and then dropped points away at Villa and Newcastle in the Premier League. They were drawn Dortmund, Sevilla, and Copenhagen in the Champions League, taking 14 points and topping the group. This was an unprecedented season format, with the first ever Winter World Cup disrupting the football calendar and disrupting all play for a month. When 16 City players departed for Qatar in late November, they were 5 points behind Arsenal, who came out of the gates flying. Haaland started the season in incredible form. By the World Cup break, he had already scored 24 goals in all competitions and looked well on pace to break every single season goal-scoring record to ever exist in England. And yet, many wondered if his presence actually made City worse. Despite all his talent, there was a significant transition period as City players adjusted to having an elite striker up top. Haaland was also not a prototypical Guardiola player, so there was a learning curve there as well. To accommodate for Haaland, Guardiola had to sacrifice some control over the game. City had to redefine their game, becoming a much more direct and more efficient team. Their struggles continued in the month and a half after the World Cup. They dropped out of the League Cup to Southampton and lost away at Manchester United and Tottenham in the league. After the 1-0 loss to Tottenham in early February, City trailed Arsenal by 5 points and the Gunners had a game in hand. There was no guarantee that City would win a trophy that season, much less the treble. This was a huge turning point in City's season, and perhaps the biggest moment of Guardiola's tenure. This new system saw Guardiola nearly abandon playing traditional fullbacks in favor of deploying a 4 center-back system. Ake, Akanji, Walker, and Diaz rotated amongst the back 3, while John Stones took on a new role as an auxiliary midfielder in possession. This allowed Gundogan and De Bruyne to push forward as the free 8s, with Grealish, Bernardo Silva, Mahrez, and Foden holding width on the wings while Haaland up top. This tactical tweak from Guardiola made City more defensively resilient and allowed for more creativity in the final third. They chased down Arsenal in the Premier League title race, beating the Gunners both home and away in the final few months of the season by a combined score of 7-2. The loss against Spurs would be their last loss until the final day of the Premier League season when they lost to Brentford after they had clinched the title. In the FA Cup, they beat Chelsea, Arsenal, Bristol City, Burnley, and Sheffield United, securing a spot in the first ever Manchester Derby FA Cup final. They handled Leipzig and Bayern in the Champions League, setting up a semi-final rematch with Real Madrid. A Kevin De Bruyne belter at the Bernabeu leveled the score heading back to the Etihad. The return leg was one of City's finest moments, winning 4-0 on the night and 5-1 on aggregate. With the Premier League wrapped up, just 2 games stood between City and eternal glory, an FA Cup final and the Champions League final against Inter Milan. At Wembley, an Ilkay Gundogan brace was enough to get City over the line, winning their second FA Cup under Guardiola. This left a date with Inter in Istanbul as the only thing standing between City and the treble. They had to be patient, but a second-half winner from Rodri secured the coveted trophy that eluded Guardiola's men for 7 years. Erling Haaland was without question the story of the season. He tallied 52 goals in all competitions, and he smashed the single-season Premier League goal record, scoring 36 goals in 35 appearances. He was named PFA Player of the Year and Premier League Player of the Season, and joining him in the PFA Team of the Year were teammates Rodri, De Bruyne, Stones, and Diaz. This season was Guardiola's magnum opus. He was brought to win the Champions League, and he finally figured out the formula. This City side was not as high-scoring, ball-dominant, and perhaps not even as talented as his previous teams, but it was indeed the best. It was football at peak efficiency, churning out result after result as they chased down one of the rarest honors in sports. Guardiola joined Sir Alex Ferguson as the only managers in English history to win a European treble. They were also the only managers to oversee a Premier League three-peat, of course. Now that we have relived these two incredible achievements, let's dive deeper into our comparison of the two squads. First up, let's look at their Premier League records during their respective three-peats. As you can see, City carry an ever so slight edge, as only 2 points separate the two teams. City both scored and conceded more goals than United during their three-peat, although some of that can be attributed to league scoring being up nearly a half goal per game since. City were more imposing offensively compared to the league average, but that United defense also put up some ridiculous numbers in their own right. If we expand our comparison to the domestic cups and Champions League, City also have a slight upper hand. That said, United won 2 Community Shields, whereas City lost 2. It's also important to note that the landscape of the Premier League was completely different for both these three-peats. For the vast majority of the 2000s, the traditional top 4 of United, Chelsea, Arsenal, and Liverpool would generally occupy the top 4 of the table. In fact, from 2000 to 2010, only 5 teams outside of the perceived top 4 actually finished there. There was much more variance in the top 4 during City's era. Traditionally big clubs like Chelsea, United, and Arsenal all went through significant down periods, while Tottenham and Newcastle both enjoyed top 4 finishes. City's biggest rivals were inconsistent at best during their three-peat. While some may argue the quality of the bottom of the table is greater than 15 years ago, the quality amongst the clubs at the top might be worse. Given this give-and-take dynamic of the quality of the Premier League, it's really hard to choose which three-peat is more impressive in this context. Now let's take a closer look at some of the Premier League legends who left their mark on these miraculous accomplishments. We'll start United's goal with Edwin van der Sar. The Dutch goalkeeper was known for solid reflexes, superb positioning, and commanding his own penalty area. His leadership and experience were crucial for United having the best defense in the league. Rio Ferdinand was an incredibly skilled defender. His composure on the ball and extensive passing range was second to none, making him a rare breed in that era. He formed a legendary partnership with Nemanja Vidic. The formidable Serbian brought physicality and grit to the backline, which was a fantastic complement to Ferdinand's skill set. Michael Carrick goes a bit under the radar when you think of this era of Manchester United, but he was a constant presence in the heart of their midfield and was instrumental to their success. Partnering Carrick was Paul Scholes, who was still class despite having so much mileage on his legs. A clutch player, goal threat, and immaculate distributor, his influence on the pitch was immeasurable. Ryan Giggs was also fantastic during this era, despite having plenty of years behind him. A remarkably consistent player who always contributed on the score sheet for United. Then we have the big boys up top. While Tevez was only at United for the 2 seasons, he was influential in bringing home the 2008 Champions League, and his work rate and ability to play off Rooney and Ronaldo made him a fan favorite. Ronaldo's greatness may also overshadow just how good Wayne Rooney was during this era. He scored a boatload of goals, most of them important, and he could do everything well and made the attack click. But Ronaldo was obviously just an incredible talent, one of the greatest that we'll ever see. He carried United to the double in 2008, going from 23 goals to 42 in one season. The evolution of his game was incredible, and it's no surprise he was able to achieve what he did in the sport. And I must say, as A, a City fan, and B, a Messi fan, I definitely grew a fonder appreciation and respect for Ronaldo given his achievements in this period. I did not grow up watching Ronaldo at Man United, so doing this video really made me reconsider my perception of him. Now to City, where goalkeeper Ederson had a redemption arc in the treble campaign. His distribution was always world class, and he allowed Guardiola to play out from the back, but his shot stopping left plenty to be desired in previous seasons. He bounced back in a big way and was crucial to the Champions League campaign. John Stones, the once heavily scrutinized Englishman, had a renaissance similar to Ederson with his new role as a midfield center-back hybrid. He was immense and, in my opinion, the linchpin of their Champions League success. His center-back partner, Ruben Diaz, has hardly set a foot wrong since he came to the Premier League 3 years ago. He saved the City defense at its most vulnerable and is yet to not win a league title in Sky Blue. Rodri has really exploded onto the scene in the last 18 months, but truly he's been excellent for quite some time. He controls the game better than anyone, he scores, creates, defends, he really does it all. İlkay Gündoğan was the hero so many times during City's three-peat. from a 13-goal season in 2020-21 to the league winner against Villa in 2022 to clutch goal after clutch goal down the stretch in 2023. Also the treble captain, Gundogan was a massive influence. Bernardo Silva was the engine of this City side. He played in a variety of positions, all at an elite level. One of Pep's favorite players, Silva was a constant contributor. While United boasted several notable academy products, Phil Foden was the lone academy standout for City. Like Silva, he's been used all across the pitch. He's also fantastically gifted, and his development is the epitome of the Guardiola era at City. That brings us to my favorite footballer ever, Kevin De Bruyne. The Belgian has been a wonder since the day he stepped foot in England. He put City on his back as the creative heartbeat multiple times. I firmly believe he'll retire as one of, if not the greatest midfielder in Premier League history. Now, that might just be my bias talking, but the numbers and tape speak for themselves. And finally, although he was only there for one season, we have to talk about Erling Haaland. He had the best individual season in Premier League history. His stature at such a young age is almost unparalleled, and the rest of his career could be unique unlike any other. I have a feeling he'll chase down several more records before he leaves England. And while I don't have cards for them, several players deserve praise for their contributions to these three-peats. For United, there's Gary Neville, Patrice Evra, Dimitar Berbatov, Wes Brown, John O'Shea, and Darren Fletcher. For City, there's Kyle Walker, Raheem Sterling, Riyad Mahrez, Aymeric Laporte, and Gabriel Jesus. And finally, it's impossible to ignore the monumental influence of the two legendary managers who guided these teams to glory. Sir Alex Ferguson dominated English football at an unprecedented level. His tenure, spanning a quarter of a century, saw him win an astonishing 13 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, and 2 Champions Leagues. It wasn't just the titles, but also the culture and mentality that he instilled in the club. Pep Guardiola may be one of the few capable of rivaling Sir Alex's impact on the English game. Not only has Guardiola dominated the Premier League since his arrival in 2016, winning 5 Premier Leagues, 2 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, and a Champions League, Guardiola has also changed the way football is played and coached in the country. Now I won't bore you with all the details, but Google the Pep effect for more info. And that brings us to the conclusion of today's video. I appreciate you all taking the time to explore these two miraculous three-peats with me. As a City fan, this project made me appreciate and respect the previous eras of Manchester United that much more. Hopefully soon, a new era will emerge, and both Manchester clubs will seriously contend for the same honors. These are two of the finest football teams to ever exist, and it may be some time before we see another team of their caliber. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please do get involved in the comments below. Which three-peat was better? Which team do you prefer? Let me know that and more. Thank you.